Policeman throws hot coffee on a black girl, father arrives, and everything changes. In a small American town, an act of police brutality against an innocent child triggers a series of events that shake the community to its core. When the girl's father, a respected civil rights attorney, witnesses the incident, his quest for justice transforms into a compelling journey of courage, determination, and social change. Dear viewers, if this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our next impactful stories. Leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. Your participation is crucial in spreading this message of justice and change. It was a sunny afternoon in a bustling park in the small town of Hope Springs, Missouri. Amelia, an 8-year-old African-American girl, was gleefully playing on the swings, her laughter echoing through the air. Her father, Dr. James Thompson, a respected civil rights attorney, watched her from afar while chatting with a colleague at a nearby coffee shop. Across the park, Officer Blake, known for his rigid demeanor and questionable track record, patrolled the area with his rookie partner, Officer Martinez. The contrast between the two was evident. While Martinez smiled and waved at the children, Blake eyed them with suspicion. Suddenly, a group of teenagers ran through the park, knocking over a trash can. The noise startled Amelia, who jumped off the swing, accidentally stumbling into Officer Blake's path. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds, but seemed to play out in slow motion. Officer Blake, in an impulsive and cruel act, poured his hot coffee over Amelia. The girl's scream of pain cut through the air, silencing the entire park. Dr. Thompson, hearing his daughter's cry, turned abruptly. His eyes widened in horror as he saw Amelia on the ground, crying in pain, with Officer Blake standing over her, the empty coffee cup still in his hand. Time seemed to freeze. People around watched in shock, unable to believe what had just happened. Officer Martinez, mouth agape, looked from Blake to the girl, clearly conflicted about how to react. Dr. Thompson ran towards his daughter, his heart pounding furiously. As he approached, he could see the fear in Amelia's eyes, mixed with the pain from the burns that were beginning to form on her delicate skin. Officer Blake, realizing the gravity of his actions, started to stammer incoherent explanations. "It was an accident. She startled me. I didn't mean to." But Dr. Thompson wasn't listening. All he could see was his injured daughter and the man responsible for her pain. At that moment, something changed within him. The usually diplomatic and peaceful attorney felt a wave of fury and indignation he had never experienced before. As he picked Amelia up in his arms, Dr. Thompson looked directly into Officer Blake's eyes and said in a low, dangerous voice, "This won't end here. You have no idea what you've just started." The crowd around began to murmur. Cell phones were pulled out to film the scene, and Officer Martinez, finally reacting, approached to try to calm the situation. But it was too late. The spark had been lit, and the fire of change was about to spread throughout the entire town. As Dr. Thompson walked away with Amelia in his arms, the tension in the air was palpable. No one knew exactly what would come next, but everyone could feel that their lives were about to change forever. Hope Springs, Missouri, a town of about 50,000 residents, had always prided itself on its apparent tranquility. With tree-lined streets and home to one of the state's best law schools, the town was known for its strong educational tradition. It was in this environment that Dr. James Thompson built his reputation as a brilliant attorney and tireless advocate for civil rights. James grew up in one of the town's most humble neighborhoods. The son of a janitor and a nurse's aide, he overcame numerous obstacles to graduate from law school. His determination and intelligence led him not only to become one of the most respected attorneys in the region, but also to marry Sarah, the daughter of a prominent federal judge. The union of James and Sarah caused ripples in local society. While some saw the marriage as a symbol of social progress, others, particularly traditional families, viewed it with suspicion. The birth of Amelia 8 years ago only intensified these conflicting feelings in the community. Amelia grew up as a bright and curious child, inheriting her father's intelligence and her mother's compassion. Her brown skin and voluminous curls were a source of pride for James, who saw in his daughter the embodiment of his struggles and hopes. Sarah, in turn, dedicated herself to creating a loving and stimulating environment for their daughter, protecting her as much as possible from the prejudiced glances they sometimes encountered. On the other side of the social spectrum was Officer Robert Blake. Born into a family of police officers, Blake grew up with a rigid and often distorted view of justice. His father, a hardline cop from the era of the civil rights movement, instilled in his son the belief that order should be maintained at any cost. Years of service in conflict-ridden areas had further hardened Blake's heart, transforming him into a bitter and prejudiced man. Officer Elena Martinez, fresh out of the police academy, represented a new generation of police officers. Idealistic and empathetic, Martinez believed in the possibility of a more humane and community-oriented police force. Her assignment to work with Officer Blake was seen by many as a baptism by fire for her convictions. The tension between Dr. Thompson's progressive approach and Officer Blake's retrograde mentality was not new in Hope Springs. In recent years, James had successfully defended several victims of police violence, particularly young black men from the outskirts of town. Each victory in the courts increased Blake's animosity towards the attorney. The incident in the park was the spark that ignited a conflict that had been fermenting for years. The image of Amelia, an innocent child, being assaulted by a police officer touched raw nerves in local society. In the hours following the incident, social media exploded with videos and accounts of what had happened. Hashtags like "Justice for Amelia" and "Shoe Hope Springs Against Racism" began circulating rapidly. At the police station, Chief Wilkins found himself at the center of a storm. Pressured by local media and growing public outrage, he knew that his actions in the coming days would define not only Blake's future, but potentially the direction of the entire department in the town. Meanwhile, at the county hospital, Sarah held Amelia's hand while doctors treated her burns. The girl, still in shock, alternated between moments of silence and quiet crying. James, outside the room, made frantic phone calls, mobilizing contacts and planning his next steps. At the Thompson home, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, activists, and local politicians sought statements and positions. The quiet life the family had built was about to be turned upside down. As night fell over Hope Springs, a sense of imminent change hung in the air. In bars, churches, and homes, people heatedly discussed the incident. Opinions were divided, alliances formed and broke. One thing was certain: the town would never be the same again. The days following the incident in the park were marked by escalating tensions in Hope Springs. Dr. James Thompson, determined to seek justice for his daughter, transformed his indignation into action. With the help of fellow attorneys and civil rights activists, he began building a solid case against Officer Blake and, by extension, against the system that allowed such abuse to occur. While Amelia recovered in the hospital, James made daily visits to the police station and the district attorney's office. His constant presence and the pressure he exerted began to unsettle local authorities. Chief Wilkins, initially reluctant to take drastic measures, found himself forced to place Officer Blake on administrative leave. This decision, though applauded by many, ignited a spark of resentment among the more conservative officers in the department. Led by Sergeant Miller, a close ally of Blake, a group of officers began organizing silent protests, wearing blue ribbons on their uniforms as a symbol of solidarity with their suspended colleague. Officer Martinez found herself in a moral dilemma. As a witness to the incident, she knew her testimony would be crucial to the case. Pressured by her colleagues to protect the department, Martinez struggled internally between her sense of duty and fear of retaliation. Local media, which initially treated the case as an isolated incident, began to investigate more deeply. Journalists unearthed other cases of police abuse that had been hushed up over the years. Reporter Michael Chen of the Hope Springs Herald became a prominent figure in the case coverage, his detailed reports exposing cracks in the town's law enforcement system. Meanwhile, on the streets, the population was divided. Peaceful protests organized by college students and social movements demanded justice for Amelia and a complete reform of the local police. Counter-movements, led by conservative groups and families of police officers, defended Blake, claiming he was being used as a scapegoat. The tension reached a new level when James received a series of anonymous threats. Notes left in his mailbox and late-night phone calls warned him to leave things as they are. Determined not to be intimidated, James increased his family's security but refused to back down. Sarah, torn between fear for her family's safety and unwavering support for her husband, became a crucial, stabilizing force. She not only cared for Amelia but also began organizing support groups for other families who had suffered police abuse, transforming her pain into collective action. The case gained even larger dimensions when national civil rights organizations took interest in the situation in Hope Springs. Representatives from major NGOs arrived in town, offering legal and media support to James and his cause. Mayor Frank Collins, feeling the growing pressure, called an emergency meeting with his cabinet. The town, which had always prided itself on its peace and prosperity, was now at the center of a national media storm. Collins knew that his next actions would define not only the political future of the town, but also his own career. In this scenario of growing polarization, an unexpected event added more fuel to the fire. A leaked audio recording, allegedly of Officer Blake talking to other officers, revealed deeply racist comments and the admission of other incidents of violence against civilians. The authenticity of the recording was questionable, but its impact was immediate and devastating. Hope Springs' black community, led by Reverend Alicia Wright of the local AME church, organized a large vigil in front of City Hall. Hundreds of people, holding candles and posters with Amelia's face, demanded systemic changes and an end to police impunity. Dr. Thompson, seeing the growing mobilization, realized that his daughter's case had become a catalyst for much greater change. What had begun as a search for personal justice was transforming into a movement for reform and equality. As the town simmered, Amelia, still recovering in the hospital, frequently asked her father when everything would return to normal. James, looking out the hospital window at the bustling streets below, knew there was no going back. Hope Springs was on the brink of a profound transformation, and he was at the center of this whirlwind. As the sun set over the town that night, no one could predict what the dawn would bring. But one thing was certain: the fight for justice was just beginning, and its outcome promised to redefine the future of an entire community. As Amelia's case gained momentum, several subplots began to develop, intertwining with the main conflict and adding layers of complexity to the narrative. Officer Elena Martinez, tormented by her moral dilemma, finally decided to break her silence. She secretly approached Dr. Thompson, offering to testify about Officer Blake's past behavior. This decision, while courageous, put Martinez in a precarious position within the department. Rumors of her betrayal began to circulate, and she found herself isolated by her colleagues, facing veiled and sometimes open hostility at work. Meanwhile, reporter Michael Chen of the Hope Springs Herald deepened his investigations. He uncovered a network of corruption involving some high-ranking police officials and influential local businessmen. This web of bribes and illegal favors seemed to have connections to previous cases of police abuse that had been hushed up. Chen found himself in a dangerous game, receiving anonymous threats and facing pressure to abandon the investigation. At City Hall, Mayor Frank Collins faced his own crisis. His chief of staff, Jennifer Lawson, was caught in a compromising phone conversation, suggesting she had prior knowledge of cases of police abuse and had helped cover them up. Collins found himself facing a dilemma: protect his long-time ally or yield to public pressure for transparency. Sarah Thompson channeled her anguish into activism. She founded the Mothers for Justice movement, bringing together other women whose children had been victims of police violence. The group began to gain visibility, organizing peaceful demonstrations and pushing for legislative changes in the city council. Meanwhile, in the community, latent racial tensions came to the fore. Amelia's case exposed deep divisions that many preferred to ignore. Reverend Alicia Wright emerged as an important voice, preaching reconciliation but also demanding justice and structural changes. Her sermons began to attract not only her usual congregation, but also young activists and community members seeking guidance and comfort. At the hospital, Amelia befriended nurse Kayla Johnson, a young woman who dreamed of becoming a doctor. Kayla shared stories of resilience and courage with the girl. This relationship not only helped Amelia in her physical and emotional recovery, but also inspired Kayla to become more actively involved in social issues in the town. Officer Blake, suspended and facing the possibility of criminal charges, began to show signs of remorse. He sought psychological help and in private sessions began to confront his deep-seated prejudices and the trauma from years of service in stressful conditions. His journey of self-reflection, though personal, had the potential to impact the outcome of the case. In the city council, Councilwoman Diane Foster, known for her progressive stance, proposed a bill to create an independent oversight board for cases of police violence. This proposal generated intense debate, dividing opinions among legislators and the population. Dr. Thompson, navigating this complex scenario, realized that his daughter's case had become a turning point for much larger issues. He began working on a class action lawsuit, aiming not only for justice for Amelia, but for a comprehensive reform of the town's policing practices. As these subplots developed, time pressure intensified. A preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks from now, and everyone involved knew this would be a crucial moment. James and his team worked tirelessly to gather evidence and witnesses, while Blake's defense prepared their strategy. The town of Hope Springs, once quiet, now buzzed with expectations, fears, and hopes. Each new development in the various fronts of the story was anxiously followed by the population, who felt that the future of their community was at stake. Amidst all this, Amelia continued her recovery, showing a resilience that inspired those around her. Her experience became a rallying point for the community, with many seeing in her story a chance for Hope Springs to confront its past and reshape its future. As the day of the hearing approached, the tension in the town was palpable. The outcome of this case had the potential to not only change Hope Springs, but to set a precedent for similar situations across the country. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived with an atmosphere heavy with tension. The Hope Springs courthouse was surrounded by a diverse crowd, protesters demanding justice, supporters of Officer Blake, journalists from across the country, and ordinary citizens, all anxious to witness this decisive moment. Dr. James Thompson arrived early, accompanied by Sarah and a recovered but still shaken Amelia. The girl, dressed in a yellow dress, her favorite color, held tightly to her father's hand, her large eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. Inside the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Simmons, known for her impartiality, presided over the session. The district attorney, Mark Ramirez, presented the charges against Officer Blake: assault, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights. Blake's defense, led by the experienced criminal defense attorney Richard Holloway, argued that the incident was an unfortunate accident, exacerbated by stress and poor working conditions in the police force. The crucial moment came when Officer Elena Martinez was called to testify. With a trembling voice but unwavering resolve, Martinez recounted not only the incident with Amelia, but also a series of problematic behaviors by Blake over the years. Her testimony was a devastating blow to the defense. However, the true turning point occurred unexpectedly. During a recess, reporter Michael Chen approached Dr. Thompson with bombshell information. He had obtained a video showing Police Chief Wilkins instructing officers to cover up cases of abuse, including Amelia's incident. James, aware of the potential impact of this evidence, faced an ethical dilemma. Using the video could compromise Chen's journalistic investigation and possibly put him in danger. On the other hand, it could be the key to not only winning the case, but also exposing systemic corruption in the police department. After a brief but intense discussion with his legal team and Chen, James made a bold decision. He asked Judge Simmons to reopen the hearing based on crucial new evidence. What followed was a moment of pure drama in the courtroom. The video was presented, leaving the court in shock. Chief Wilkins, present in the audience, visibly paled. Judge Simmons, recognizing the gravity of the situation, ordered an immediate investigation. Officer Blake, seeing the extent of the exposed corruption, made a surprising decision. In an apparent moment of moral clarity, he stood up and asked to speak. To everyone's astonishment, Blake confessed not only his guilt in the incident with Amelia, but also revealed details about the culture of cover-ups and abuse within the police department. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Journalists rushed to report the shocking turn of events. Judge Simmons, struggling to maintain order, suspended the hearing and ordered the preventive detention of Chief Wilkins and other officers implicated in Blake's revelations. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. The crowd, already agitated, became frenzied. Chants of justice and reform now echoed through the streets. Mayor Collins, watching the events unfold on television in his office, realized that his town was on the brink of a social revolution. Dr. Thompson, emerging from the courthouse with his family, was received as a hero. Reporters crowded around him, bombarding him with questions. But it was Amelia who captured everyone's attention. The girl, with a maturity beyond her years, took a reporter's microphone and said in a clear voice, "I just want no other child to go through what I went through. Can we make that happen?" Her simple words, broadcast live across the country, touched the heart of the nation. At that moment, the case ceased to be just about a girl and a police officer. It became a symbol of the fight against injustice and discrimination. As the sun set on Hope Springs that historic evening, the town was unrecognizable. Groups gathered in the streets, discussing the day's events and the future that lay ahead of them. The case that began with an act of cruelty against an innocent child had transformed into the catalyst for profound social change. Dr. Thompson, exhausted but determined, knew this was just the beginning. The battle for justice and reform was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of true hope. Looking at Amelia, who was finally smiling again, he silently promised that he would do everything in his power to build a better world for her and for all the children of Hope Springs. In the weeks following the historic hearing, Hope Springs found itself at the epicenter of an unprecedented social and political transformation. The revelations in the courtroom triggered a series of events that shook the town's power structures and reverberated throughout the country. The state governor, pressured by public opinion and national media, announced an intervention in the local police force. A special task force, composed of federal investigators and police reform experts, was sent to conduct a complete audit of the Hope Springs Police Department. Mayor Frank Collins, trying to distance himself from the scandal, proposed a series of radical reforms. Among them was the creation of a civilian police oversight board with real investigative and punitive powers. This proposal, although viewed with skepticism by some, was received with enthusiasm by the majority of the population. In the City Council, Councilwoman Diane Foster saw her independent oversight proposal gain massive support. The bill, previously controversial, was unanimously approved in an extraordinary session, marked by emotional speeches and applause from the packed gallery. Officer Blake, following his shocking confession, was formally indicted and awaited trial. His decision to cooperate with investigations led to the reopening of dozens of archived cases of police abuse. Families who had been seeking justice for years saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Officer Elena Martinez, initially ostracized by her colleagues, emerged as a symbol of integrity within the police force. Her testimony inspired other officers to break the blue wall of silence and report abusive practices. A new generation of police officers, led by Martinez, began actively advocating for a more community-oriented and less militarized approach to public safety. Reporter Michael Chen, whose courageous investigation was crucial in exposing corruption, became a local celebrity and received offers from major national news outlets. However, he chose to remain in Hope Springs, committed to continuing his investigative journalism work in the town. The Mothers for Justice movement, founded by Sarah Thompson, grew exponentially. The group became a powerful voice in the community, organizing civil rights workshops, offering psychological support to victims of police violence and their families, and actively participating in discussions about police reform. In the community, Reverend Alicia Wright saw her congregation grow, attracting people from all backgrounds seeking healing and reconciliation. She initiated a dialogue program between police officers and community members, creating a safe space for frank discussions and bridge building. Dr. James Thompson, now a national figure in the fight for social justice, was invited to lecture at universities and participate in televised debates. He used his new platform to advocate for systemic reforms, not just in policing, but in the entire criminal justice system. Amelia, physically recovered but still processing the emotional trauma, involuntarily became a symbol of resistance and hope. Her photo, bravely smiling next to her father on the courthouse steps, was reproduced on murals throughout the town and shared thousands of times on social media. The local economy also felt the impact of the changes. Businesses began adopting more robust diversity and inclusion policies, fearing association with the discriminatory practices exposed in the case. The local university saw an increase in enrollments for law and social sciences courses, with many young people inspired to pursue careers in civil rights advocacy and justice system reform. However, not all reactions were positive. Conservative groups and police unions resisted the changes, arguing that the reforms would compromise public safety. Veiled threats against Dr. Thompson and his family continued, necessitating additional security measures. As Hope Springs navigated these turbulent waters of change, it became clear that the town would never be the same. The case that began with an act of cruelty against a child had transformed into a catalyst for social revolution, whose effects would continue to unfold in the months and years to come. 6 months had passed since the fateful day in the park, and Hope Springs was unrecognizable. The town, once a symbol of apparent tranquility that masked deep-rooted problems, was now seen as a model of social transformation across the country. Dr. James Thompson, the man who inadvertently became the catalyst for this change, faced new challenges. His legal battle had expanded far beyond Amelia's case. Now, he led a team of young attorneys dedicated to reforming the town's justice system. Each victory in the courts, each policy altered, was a step towards the vision of a more just society he had always dreamed of. However, James struggled to balance his new public role with his family responsibilities. The long hours at the office and frequent trips for conferences and lectures kept him away from home more than he liked. It was Sarah who reminded him of the importance of not losing sight of why it all began. Amelia. Amelia, in turn, showed surprising resilience. With the help of therapy and the tireless support of her parents, she began to overcome her trauma. Her initial fear of police officers was slowly replaced by cautious curiosity, especially after a series of school visits organized by reformist officers like Elena Martinez. The girl, now 9 years old, surprised everyone when she asked to speak at a school assembly about her experience. With wisdom beyond her years, Amelia shared not just her pain, but also her hope for a better future. Her simple yet powerful speech moved students and teachers alike, inspiring a civil rights awareness program in schools across the town. Sarah, balancing her role as a mother with her growing activism, saw the Mothers for Justice movement transform into an official NGO. She now led empowerment workshops and offered legal and psychological support to families affected by police violence throughout the state. Her journey from concerned wife and mother to respected community leader was a testament to her own personal growth. Officer Elena Martinez faced her own challenges. Initially ostracized by many of her colleagues, she persisted in her mission to reform the police from within. Slowly, she gained allies, especially among younger recruits who saw her as a mentor. Martinez initiated a community policing program that was beginning to show promising results, reducing crime rates and improving relations between the police and citizens. Reporter Michael Chen, now an award-winning journalist, continued his crusade for transparency. He expanded his investigation to other towns in the state, exposing corruption networks and inspiring changes beyond the borders of Hope Springs. His tireless work not only brought injustices to light but also stories of hope and transformation. Reverend Alicia Wright saw her church become a center for community reconciliation. She regularly organized dialogues between former police officers, like the now imprisoned Blake, and community members who had suffered at the hands of the police. These meetings, though initially tense, began to break down barriers and promote mutual understanding. Councilwoman Diane Foster, buoyed by the success of her oversight proposal, now led a progressive coalition in the city council. She worked tirelessly to pass laws promoting equality and justice, from educational reform to more inclusive housing policies. Mayor Frank Collins, initially reluctant to embrace radical changes, surprised everyone by becoming a vocal advocate for reform. Realizing his legacy was at stake, he collaborated closely with activists and reformers, transforming Hope Springs into a laboratory for innovative public policies. As the town grew and transformed, new challenges emerged. The rapid change brought resistance from more conservative sectors of society. Heated debates about the balance between public safety and civil rights continued to dominate discussions in the town. Dr. Thompson and his family, at the center of this whirlwind of changes, also evolved. They learned to deal with public attention, constant pressure, and occasional threats with a grace and determination that inspired those around them. On a quiet evening, sitting on their porch, James, Sarah, and Amelia reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. Amelia, playing with her new puppy, a gift symbolizing her healing process, looked at her parents and said, "You know, sometimes I think that bad day in the park was like throwing a pebble in a pond. The ripples keep spreading, but now they're making good things happen." James and Sarah exchanged emotional glances, realizing the profound truth in their daughter's words. Hope Springs' transformation, born from a moment of pain, continued to unfold, promising a brighter future not just for their family, but for the entire community. A year after the incident that changed Hope Springs, the town was preparing for an event that promised to be the pinnacle of its transformation. The first National Forum on Police Reform and Social Justice, hosted in Hope Springs itself. The event, organized by a coalition led by Dr. James Thompson would attract activists, academics, politicians, and community leaders from across the country. It was an unprecedented opportunity for Hope Springs to showcase to America what it had achieved and discuss the next steps in the fight for a more just society. In the days leading up to the forum, tension in the town was palpable. Dr. Thompson, now a national figure in the civil rights struggle, worked tirelessly on the final preparations. He knew this event could be a turning point, not just for Hope Springs, but for the entire country. Sarah, meanwhile, coordinated a series of parallel workshops focused on community empowerment and support for victims of police violence. Her work with Mothers for Justice had expanded significantly, and she saw the forum as an opportunity to connect similar movements from across America. Amelia, now 10 years old and recovered from her traumas, was scheduled to give an opening speech at the forum. She spent hours practicing with her parents, determined to use her voice to inspire change. Meanwhile, Officer Elena Martinez led efforts to ensure the event's security. She worked closely with community leaders to develop a security plan that prioritized de-escalation and mutual respect, a crucial test for the new community policing model she had implemented. Reporter Michael Chen prepared a special series of reports on Hope Springs' transformation, planning to launch it during the forum. His investigations had uncovered new information about the extent of police corruption in the past, revelations that promised to stir the waters even more. Reverend Alicia Wright organized an interfaith peace vigil on the eve of the forum. She saw the event as an opportunity to heal old wounds and build bridges between groups that were previously on opposite sides. Councilwoman Diane Foster prepared to present an ambitious legislative package during the forum, proposing reforms that went beyond policing, addressing systemic inequalities in education, housing, and employment. However, not everyone in Hope Springs was excited about the forum. Conservative groups and police unions planned protests, claiming that the reforms had weakened public safety. Rumors of possible disruptions during the event circulated, increasing pressure on Martinez and her team. As delegations from across the country began to arrive, the town buzzed with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Hotels were booked solid, restaurants were full, and the streets vibrated with animated discussions about the future of justice in America. On the eve of the forum, Dr. Thompson received an anonymous call with a veiled threat. Although he was accustomed to such intimidations, this one seemed different, more concrete. Reluctantly, he shared the information with Martinez, who doubled down on security measures. That night, the Thompson family gathered for an intimate dinner. Despite the excitement for the impending event, there was an underlying tension. James and Sarah exchanged worried glances, aware of the risks they were taking. Amelia, sensing her parents' anxiety, surprised them with her maturity. "No matter what happens tomorrow, we've already made a difference. We're in this together." Her words served as a powerful reminder of why they were doing all this. Renewed in their purpose, they hugged, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. As the town slept, final preparations for the forum were being made. Stages were set up, banners hung, and security teams made their final rounds. Hope Springs was about to step into the national spotlight, and the stage was set for a confrontation that could define the future of police reform and social justice in America. The day of the National Forum on Police Reform and Social Justice dawned with a mix of tension and hope hanging over Hope Springs. The streets surrounding the convention center, where the event was to be held, were filled with people, from eager delegates to protesters on both sides of the debate. Dr. James Thompson arrived early with his family, passing through rigorous security checks. Officer Elena Martinez, visibly tense, greeted them personally, briefing them on the enhanced security measures due to recent threats. The opening ceremony began promptly at 9 a.m. The main auditorium was packed, with hundreds of people and dozens of TV cameras focused on the stage. Mayor Frank Collins gave a brief welcome speech, highlighting Hope Springs' journey of transformation. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Amelia took the stage, her small figure contrasting with the grandeur of the event. With a steady voice that belied her age, she began, "A year ago, I was just a girl who suffered something terrible. Today, I stand here not as a victim, but as a voice of hope." As Amelia spoke, moving the audience with her story of pain and resilience, Officer Martinez received an alert on her radio. A suspicious group had been spotted approaching the security perimeter. Simultaneously, reporter Michael Chen, seated in the front row, received an anonymous message on his phone. "The full truth will be revealed today. Stay alert." Amelia's speech ended to a standing ovation. Dr. Thompson moved, took the stage to introduce the next speaker. At that moment, a commotion erupted at the back of the auditorium. A group of men, later identified as former police officers dismissed during the reforms, stormed into the venue. They shouted accusations that the reforms had destroyed their lives and demanded to be heard. Panic began to spread through the crowd. Officer Martinez and her team quickly mobilized to contain the situation, but they were outnumbered. Dr. Thompson, seeing chaos unfold, made a bold decision. Instead of being evacuated as security insisted, he grabbed the microphone and, with a calm but firm voice, said, "Gentlemen, you came here to be heard, so let's hear you out. This forum is about dialogue and change. Let's talk." His unexpected action caught everyone off guard. The intruders, who had expected resistance, were momentarily at a loss. Seizing this moment, Reverend Wright, who was in the audience, stood up and offered to mediate the discussion. What followed was a tense but transformative dialogue. The former officers, led by a man named Richard, expressed their frustration with the reforms, claiming they had been unfairly labeled and discarded. Dr. Thompson listened attentively, and to many's surprise acknowledged that mistakes had been made in the reform process. "True change," he said, "doesn't mean abandoning those who have dedicated their lives to public service. It means working together to create a better system for everyone." While this drama unfolded on stage, Michael Chen was receiving more anonymous messages. Documents were being leaked to him in real time, revealing a conspiracy that went beyond Hope Springs, a national network of police corruption that had been trying to sabotage the reforms. With attention focused on the confrontation on stage, Sarah noticed Chen's agitation. Quickly grasping the situation, she discreetly worked with the technical team to prepare the presentation of the new evidence. The climax reached its peak when Richard, the leader of the former officers, broke down in tears, admitting they had been manipulated by powerful figures who wanted to maintain the status quo. His confession coincided with the moment Chen, with Sarah's help, projected the leaked documents onto the auditorium screens. The revelation was shocking. The evidence not only corroborated Richard's story, but also exposed a network of corruption extending to the highest levels of state and federal government. The auditorium fell silent for a moment, absorbing the impact of the revelations. Then, slowly, a wave of conversations began to grow. Delegates from different states started to stand up, sharing similar stories from their own cities. Dr. Thompson, seeing the historic moment unfolding, proposed right there the formation of a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. "Today," he declared, "is not the end of our struggle. It's the true beginning of a national transformation." As TV cameras broadcast live, the forum transformed from a potential disaster into a moment of unprecedented unity. Activists, reformist police officers, and even former opponents united in a commitment to work together for real and lasting change. As the sun set on Hope Springs on that historic day, it was clear that the small town had not only faced its own crisis, but had also ignited the spark of a national revolution in the pursuit of justice and equality. In the weeks following the dramatic National Forum, Hope Springs found itself at the center of a transformation that went far beyond its borders. The impact of the revelations and the unexpected dialogue that occurred that day reverberated throughout the country. The National Truth and Reconciliation Commission, proposed by Dr. James Thompson, was quickly established with bipartisan support. Led by a diverse coalition of activists, reformist ex-police officers, academics, and community leaders, the commission began a thorough work of investigation and reform on a national scale. In Hope Springs, the consequences were immediate and profound. The community policing model developed by Officer Elena Martinez was adopted as a pilot project for other cities. Martinez, now promoted to captain, became a sought-after consultant, traveling across the country to share the lessons learned in Hope Springs. Reporter Michael Chen, whose courage in revealing the leaked documents was crucial to the forum's outcome, received the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism. His work inspired a new generation of investigative journalists dedicated to exposing injustices and promoting transparency. The Mothers for Justice movement, led by Sarah Thompson, expanded into a national network of support and advocacy. She became a prominent figure in the fight for the rights of families affected by police violence, working closely with the new National Commission. Amelia, whose moving speech had touched hearts across the country, became a symbol of hope and resilience. Invitations to speak at schools and youth events arrived constantly, and she embraced her role as a young activist, always accompanied and guided by her parents. Reverend Alicia Wright saw her approach to reconciliation and dialogue adopted by religious leaders throughout America. She initiated a national training program for community mediators, focused on building bridges between communities and police forces. Dr. James Thompson, the man whose personal journey had triggered all this transformation, found himself in a position of national influence he had never imagined. Invited to advise the Department of Justice, he dedicated himself to institutionalizing the reforms that had begun in Hope Springs. The town itself became a model of successful reform and a destination for scholars and activists from around the world. Crime rates fell, trust in the police increased, and a palpable sense of civic pride permeated the streets. However, James and Sarah knew the work was far from over. Challenges remained, resistance still existed, and the fight for a truly just and equal society was an ongoing process. On a quiet evening, sitting on the porch of their home, the same house where it all began, James, Sarah, and Amelia reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. Amelia, now an articulate and aware teenager, looked at her parents and said, "You know, that day in the park seemed like the end of the world to me. But really, it was just the beginning of something much bigger." James and Sarah smiled, moved by their daughter's wisdom. They knew that their fight for justice had transformed into a legacy that would continue far beyond them, inspiring future generations to build a more just and compassionate world. 5 years after the National Forum, Hope Springs celebrated its transformation with an annual Justice and Community Festival. The streets, once tense with mistrust, now overflowed with music and laughter. Amelia, now 15, led a group of young activists, planning the town's future that she helped change. Dr. James and Sarah, though still active in the fight for justice, found balance, dedicating more time to family and the local community. The old park, scene of the incident that triggered everything, was renamed Reconciliation Square, symbolizing the town's healing journey. Hope Springs, once a symbol of conflict, was now a beacon of hope for America. Dear viewers, if you've followed this story to its end, your journey with us through Hope Springs has truly been inspiring. Now, it's your turn to make a difference. Comment "I watched until the end" to show your support and engagement with stories that promote positive change in our society. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to receive more impactful content like this. Your participation is crucial in spreading messages of justice and social transformation. And don't stop here. Click on the video appearing in the end screen to continue exploring stories that can change the world. Together, we can make a difference.